Paratopia, we have a very special guest. Please welcome Dr. Phil Haseley. He is a professor of anthropology at Niagara Community College. He is a member of MUFON, and most recently and most famously around the internets, perhaps you've read an article or two wherein he's been calling for a university-level study of ufology. Basically, he wants ufology to be a course taught in colleges and universities. So, let's hear all about it. Here's Dr. Phil. Okay, it's not that Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil Haseley.
Hey, Paratopia, it's Jeff and Jeremy here with you again on a Friday night. Our guest tonight is Dr. Phil Haseley. He is basically calling for the UFO subject to be put into studies on a university level. Am I right in that, Professor? We're talking about bringing this in as a legitimate study to scholastic activities, right?
Yes, I think that the time has come when that can happen and should happen. I think since UFO studies have been marginalized for probably 60 years now, and there has been no slack in the amount of appearances of the phenomena. It has affected our culture and our individual lives in so many ways. Something that enduring and something that has that kind of effect is very definitely in need of much closer study and much better appreciation by the general populace and by scientists particularly.
Now, your main interest in this would be in an anthropology sense, right? I mean, this would be why do people react the way they do to the unknown? Is that your main focus, or are you mainly focused on the UFO thing specifically and not so much the paranormal in general as say, ghost phenomena or ESP or any of those other kind of, tandem topics?
Well, I would say that, when I started out as the MUFON section director here in Western New York, my primary interest was UFOs, and from an anthropological point of view, interested in it as a case of how people do react to different types of unusual stimuli, and certainly also, though, the UFO phenomenon itself, and, like most people, being interested in just what it all really means. However, as I went deeper into the study and got to know more and more people who were witnesses, experiencers, and other people involved with the phenomena, you have really no choice but to be dragged into screaming and kicking sometimes the whole realm of paranormal things, particularly once you get involved with abductees. It's virtually impossible to ignore the fact that that's part of that whole experience is paranormal phenomena in general. That goes right along with the abduction experience.
How do you approach an investigation on your own or with a team? Do you what would be your method of operation at the very onset?
Well, it's going to depend upon, of course, what the case is. I get the cases sent to me by either MUFON Central, or I get them on my own by contacts with people who have friends, relatives, and so on. But depending upon the type of case, if it's a relatively distant sighting or something of that nature, it involves basically questioning the witness at length. Trying to pin down exactly what they saw and where they saw it and under what conditions they saw it. Basically referring to astronomical information and observations, meteorological data. Basically trying to figure out that there's some kind of natural object that might be involved here. Mm-hmm. If the case warrants it, perhaps consulting our local weather folks at the airport in terms of their radar observations, or perhaps even the air base here in Niagara Falls for radar observations if it happens to be limited to this area. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of things that we do, and we usually do it in teams of two. Okay. Basically to allow us to keep a check on each other and to watch ourselves in terms of how we question witnesses, in terms of making sure we don't lead them, make sure we don't, take them off in the wrong directions.
Okay. So, it's fairly standard then. I mean, as far as, it's fairly standard MUFON operating procedure to
and
do the formal question.
MUFON has got those kinds of cases down pretty bad.
Yeah.
The problem becomes much more uncertain. It comes when you get into cases which are close encounters and even more so abductions. There's literally no format that MUFON has developed that really allows you to deal with the long-term encounters of someone who may have been having encounters for 20 years and continues to have them. It's almost impossible to summarize that on a form, or to really reduce it to data, in a simple way. So that becomes a matter of you developing a relationship with the people concerned, and over time, basically investigating, the happenings that occur to them as best you can, and with the instruments that you have to actually try to figure out what's going on.
So can I assume that your outlook on this when you approach it is that you approach this as a nuts and bolts phenomena as opposed to something a little bit more exotic or complex than the norm?
Let's say my first assumption, is that this is something that is going to be observable and material enough for me to investigate it in a straightforward way. Mm-hmm. It is something, however, that is not always met, in terms of my experiences, because there are a lot of things that people observe and have happened to them that can happen quickly and may leave no traces, yet have enormous impact upon their personalities and upon their psychological well-being. And how they perceive other people around them as well. So those types of phenomena, the more transient mental phenomena, the more transient even physical or conscious phenomena are much more difficult to handle in terms of investigations.
Do you ever go so far as to actually study the person more than the phenomena that you're there to talk about? I mean, if someone has a UFO sighting at very close range and maybe subsequently has a close encounter experience with some sort of being of some sort, mm-hmm. Do you ever go so far as to focus more on that person, what's going on in their lives, or are they in any sort of liminal state at all? Are they switching jobs? I mean, do you go in that depth with your investigations?
In a word, yes.
And what do you find in that? I mean, what commonalities have you found in the people that you've looked at? Well,
there's some commonalities in the people that, particularly, I would say, among abductees, there are some commonalities of experience and of personality type. There seems to be a high frequency of people, I would say, who have artistic background or basically a creative type of background. Many of them are in professions which call upon creativity, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. I would say that these people have, I guess you would say how could I put it? A more fluid ability to relate to their outer circumstances and to the environment, perhaps, than other people. A creative response to the environment, I guess I'd say, than perhaps other people have. Other than that, some of the things which I have not encountered have surprised me more, because in reading the literature, I have, thought I might actually see this. For example, I had heard from several abduction researchers that certain racial or ethnic groups would tend to be more frequently found among abductees, and in surveys I've done in Niagara County, as well as in my own investigations, haven't seen that to be the case. For example, I remember reading a book which specified that Native Americans would have higher degrees of abduction experiences, but that hasn't proved to be so in the investigations that I have done or in surveys of the county, that I've been working on either.
Have you? I'm just curious, just for my own peace of mind here. Have you found that there is any ethnic connection at all?
I haven't found any in this, at least in this region. I can't speak for the United States as a whole, but I've, as part of a survey, I've interviewed and had others, who I've trained interview about 2,800 people, in Niagara County alone. Where there are both Native American populations and many, many other ethnic groups. I have not been able to see any real differences in terms of, the likelihood of abduction or the experiences among them.
Okay. Are you seeing, I don't know, a definitive separation, I should say, between the literature that you've probably read over the years about investigations and about the phenomena as a whole, and then once you got actively involved in studying cases or investigating, abduction cases and studying the people involved, are you finding that, I guess, the commonly held theorems and theories and methodologies don't seem to really hold up to what you're seeing out in the field?
I would say that the idea that every abductee is exactly alike, in their experiences, both as children or as adults, is simply not true. The idea that there's one commonality, like childhood sexual abuse, for example, which is commonly put forward, is going to be there in all cases. I haven't found that to be so. Necessarily, or at least in which they've been willing to share with me. Let's put it that way. Right. I do find, however, that there are, I guess you'd have to say, occasionally startling repeat patterns of experience, in that way, of individual episodes. I remember talking very recently to a lady who, very well educated, very articulate and, social worker by trade, who had an experience, which virtually duplicated in most of the details the Allagash abductions. Okay. I mean, right down to many of the small details.
Does that make you give pause that maybe it's an issue of cultural contamination with someone like that?
It could be. In fact, that was one of the questions that I did ask her. How much do you know about the UFO literature? Have you studied it? Do you know much about the abduction issue? And she admitted that she knew a little bit about the abduction issue, but she was not an aficionado. I've not broached the Allagash abduction episode with her because I'm still investigating her case. And I don't want her to go looking into it and basically,
right.
decide at that point to go and do something with it. Right. You do see repeat patterns, and sometimes you get strange little verifications of an incident. I was talking to an abductee who has been an abductee since the age of 5, according to his testimony. And he told me about a very strange incident that occurred to him as he was driving down a little rural country road here in western New York. He was traveling to the north along a country road near Lake Ontario, and he looked to his left, and all of a sudden he saw this flock of ducks that was flying across this open field. And then all of a sudden the ducks hit what appeared to be an invisible wall and then just fell to the ground. He didn't know whether they were dead or what their situation was because he continued on in his car, but it was, obviously pretty strange situation. I'd never heard anything like that before. But about 6 months later, I think it was, I was listening to one of the UFO Hunters broadcasts, specifically the one on Stevensville. And at the end of one of the segments, a woman came on and talked about having seen a group of birds, fly into what appeared to be an invisible barrier, hit the barrier, and fall down. You get these kinds of, how can you say it, kind of confirmations of unusual stories that really puzzle you, in that way.
Right.
As to, and just, you don't know what to make of them.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to check the timeline with Stevensville, but I do know that the bird flying into an invisible type of thing, that was a prominently featured scene in the movie Signs with Mel Gibson. That was one of the things.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I have not seen that movie.
I'd like to know what the timeline of that. I can't remember exactly when that was released, but that did come out. I mean, I'm kind of like a big cultural contamination guy. In recent weeks, this program, I'm not sure if you've been listening or not the past few weeks, but we've run into some really big issues with the regression hypnotherapy issue in regard to retrieving memories from experiencers. And we had Dr. Scott Lilienfeld on, who authored many books on the subject, but in particular, I believe it was called Pseudoscience and Psychology, in which he laid out for us all of the really large and crucial issues that come up when you're talking about regression hypnotherapy, and how it's not really a valid tool to be using in this field at all, because the data is simply not reliable. Cultural contamination being only one of those problems, although a big one. How are you dealing with experiencers who are they recalling outright? Are you using any kind of tool whatsoever to garner memories from these people?
I personally don't use any hypnosis or anything of that nature. In fact, I basically wave in the other direction, for the abductees that I've dealt with. I want them to try to remember what they can on their own, because for the reasons that I simply tell them, you can go that route, and I certainly can't stop you, but I'm not going to encourage it, for several reasons. One, being the possibility that it may turn out traumatic for you in terms of remembering things, or perhaps manufacturing memories that could turn out to be rather difficult for you to bear.
Sure.
Also because, simply put, I know that hypnosis, although it can can produce truthful testimony, is certainly not the royal road to truth. And so basically, you have to take it as something that may produce something useful, may be helpful, but I'm frankly leery. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counselor. I don't try to get people to do that. And I would just assume, for my own purposes, have them remember what they can remember, and hope that time and outside stimuli will increase their memory on their own.
Now, as an anthropologist, and I have to kind of tell you a little bit about what I found about people in this who had never had an experience in their lives, and then just all of a sudden popped into either a MUFON meeting or, if I was talking someplace and they would come up to me after a lecture was over. I personally found that a lot of people tended to dissolve spiritually if they had any sort of spiritual bend at all, whether it be Christianity, Judaism, whatever. That after this experience, depending on how profound it was for them, they would then question that religious belief. They would question the nature of reality. Many times their lives would fall into complete disarray after something like this. In other words, the divorces seem to be prevalent in a lot of people. I don't know, kind of an obsessive tendency to find out what they saw, what it all means, what it means to them. Do you find these similar things in the people that you're speaking with up there?
I've seen that in some. In fact, I have a person who is a member of our group who, at least initially, represented that he had never had such experiences, but now has come forward to say that he has had, abduction experiences and is undergoing them. And he clearly is going through a process of what appears to be trauma and disorganization, in that way. Others, such as this individual I told you about who had begun his abductions since at the age of 5, have a very stable marriage and, basically seems to be in other fashions pretty well adjusted. So I would say that what you're describing, could be described, I think, as a pattern, but not the exclusive pattern that I have run into.
Right, right. Now you want to bring this into kind of a scholastic framework here, and I'm just curious, how would you plan on actually doing that? Because one of the things that I know I was speaking on another radio show a couple of weeks ago about paranormal TV, which is all the rage right now with ghost hunters and all these different paranormally bent shows. And I made the statement that it seems to me to be a little difficult to form any kind of successful program around a phenomena that is so incredibly elusive, which no doubt this is. So how would you go about teaching this in a classroom when, to tell you the truth, we really know so very little about it and about its possible origins? That's kind of why I asked you about how you approach this at the onset, because a lot of people would immediately come out with, well, I think the extraterrestrial hypothesis is the way to go. I think that's what we're dealing with. And you didn't say that. You leave yourself very open to, it seems, many possibilities.
Well, I think you've hit it right on the head there. I don't necessarily buy the extraterrestrial hypothesis. When you read witness descriptions of their encounters and experiences, they are too various in terms of the effect upon the individual and the precise details of the psychological transformations and the psychological and mental how would you say, effects, of the phenomena to really strike me as conclusively pointing to one particular phenomena. Also, in terms of the extraterrestrial, there's some fundamental things that have always bothered me about it. The skeptical or the debunker may explain this somewhat differently, but one of the things that has bothered me always is the simple fact that 99 out of 100 humanoids that are met are just that, humanoids.
Right.
They have 2 arms, 2 legs, a mouth, and so on. The likelihood of the human form or anything much like it evolving again on another planet, I think, is pretty remote. It's not even that common on this planet,
right.
Among animal forms.
True. Right. Yeah.
So that strikes me as being, not very consistent with an extraterrestrial hypothesis. If you are to take literally what the witness sees as representing what he's really got there in terms of an entity. That's something which has bothered me. Also, there are the arguments about the intergalactic distances and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that bothers me less than perhaps it might bother some people. The fact, that you see commonly, these objects within our atmosphere, but encounters outside of it are really relatively rare, also strikes me as being rather peculiar. That is something which strikes me as you may be dealing with something that is either indigenous or certainly goes and comes within the context of the confines of the earth in that way.
Okay. So in terms of bringing this to a mainstream study, how would you do it? How, if you were writing the curriculum, what would you, how would you do this?
Well, my main goal would be to convince the student who takes it that there's a phenomenon here, whatever its origin might be, that is worthy of scientific attention, and that, number two, that it has been systematically shoved aside and marginalized. I would probably start out by putting a section in on really the history since 1947 of the phenomena and people's reaction to it. And it would be basically focused on, here's the evidence that says that this phenomena is not being taken seriously, and here's the hallmarks of that lack of proper investigation, and that, if you want to call it that, cover up, if you prefer, that has been on occasion, come out in the open, on the part of authorities. I would want them to have a historical background, and then I would introduce them simply to the best cases of each type. Basically of each of the major categories of sightings and experiences, and try to analyze them both in terms of what they tell us about the phenomena, but also what they tell us about the people, who are experiencing it and the times in which they were experienced. Being an anthropologist, I'm always interested in cultural context too, and that's something which would have to be part of looking at those individual cases. Right. How much were they influenced by what was happening at that particular moment, in American culture or in any other culture in which that case is embedded. I probably would go from there to looking at the various theories about origins of what this phenomena is, and perhaps look at I guess you'd have to say the relative merits of each of the theories in that way. I probably would also want the students to feed back into this in some fashion, by thinking about the social reactions of a society confronted with a completely unexplained phenomenon of this nature, and trying to fit it into its worldview. In some ways, I think American society is very poorly prepared to deal with a completely unknown phenomena that may have be interacting with it and has interacted with it for a very long time, and including that in our worldview, much more difficult for us than it might be for an African villager or a Native American or even someone from the outback of Australia. We run the risk by our materialistic, skeptical scientific nature of, I guess you'd say it canalizing or basically restricting our view of reality so that, a real proof of really unusual and, overwhelming reality might actually really blow us apart.
Right. Would you, in your curriculum for this, would you add in the thing that I think Jeremy and I tend to focus more on than anything else, which is the aspect that's been so long ignored in mainstream ufology, which is the high strangeness category of experience. Things that seem to have more to do with human perception and cultural filters in experiencing the phenomena as a whole. Would you kind of keep that separate from this, or would you absolutely include that in some sort of teaching, no matter how ill-defined that may be? Would you include that in it?
I'm kind of at a loss to answer that question because I'm not sure how you define high strangeness or what kind of events you might be talking about. That word gets thrown around a lot in ufology. Everything from cattle mutilations to Bigfoot sightings, in association with UFOs.
Well, let me give you one. Okay. Here's one that I got some years ago, and we've talked about on the show before, which is I got a call from a family in a fairly rural area of Maryland, and they had a central family home and two smaller buildings off from the house that housed their farm equipment. And on one particular night, they had two balls of light hover over the one building for a matter of minutes, and then the next night, which is the night that they called me, they had two lights hovering over the opposite building. When the farmer shone a light at the lights, it was an upside down, or I'm sorry, it wasn't an upside down, it was a right side up tractor trailer tanker in the air, hovering, which then departed the scene at high speed. Now that's high strangeness. But he is absolutely positive, without a shadow of a doubt, that what he saw was a tanker truck in the air over his barn. Another one was a woman reporting an object over a field some miles from her house that was the equivalent of an upside-down Star Trek Enterprise, complete with lettering, windows, warp drive lights, the whole bit. Things that seem to be, I don't know, what people expect to see or don't expect to see, or some sort of cultural or mindset filter that they have that seems to be more a matter of altered perception or altered states of consciousness than it does what are we really seeing here. That's kind of how I define high strangeness for you in that way.
Okay. I think that some cases of that sort of thing would be critical to really talking about this issue, because of the fact that there seems to me pretty convincing evidence that whatever this phenomena is, it interacts with the individual's own mind and perhaps their own relevant cultural information. Mm-hmm. And may have the capacity to change form, basically present itself in different ways. Now, whether that is simply something that's coming from the mind of the percipient, or whether that is an interactive effect, between whatever this thing is, and
big question.
Is a good question. But I was talking to a former deputy sheriff who was who was a deputy sheriff in Florida, and he told me about a close encounter that he had on patrol one time, in which he saw this what first appeared to be a cigar-shaped craft, basically hovering over woods, not more than a couple of 100 yards away, and then moving along, it rapidly turned its form into a more elongated cigar shape, without any real major change in angle of view or anything of that nature. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there have been several recorded cases, like a famous one up in Labrador, where, a UFO was seen to visually transform itself by pilots, mm-hmm. From a more conventional UFO into a plane-shaped UFO. Mm-hmm. This kind of stuff does put you in the category of asking the question, are these transformations really going on, or are they in the mind of the percipients, or are they being influenced to be in the mind of the percipient?
Right.
It's a $64,000 question.
Well, I mean, that kind of thing often, as we said before on this show, is one of the things that puts us into the realm of this is too much to take, it's too unbelievable to be true, but you hear it over and over and over again. And I've said before that, to relate the experience, for anyone to relate the experience with 100% honesty is to almost be made a fool of, because this phenomena seems to have its own built-in escape hatch for that sort of thing.
Good way of putting it. Very good way.
You know what? Every guest I have on that I say that to snickers when I say that. So we all know what we're talking about here. See, that's something that in a curriculum manner, I don't even know how you go about presenting that that would be a really tough thing to define.
I think you might present it simply as interactive effects.
Yeah.
Basically, which might include also Richard, the fellow who does the pilot studies, whose last name I now have forgotten. He works for
Richard Haynes.
Richard Haynes.
Yes. He wrote a book about basically cases where it appears to be interaction between witnesses and UFOs, where in one fashion or another the UFO has responded to witnesses. Either they flash a light at it and it comes toward them, or they're thinking come closer and it comes closer. There's some kind of an interaction going on mentally in that way. You might curricularly, as you say, lump these things into a basket of interactive effects of that sort. Right. I don't know if that really is much more than a convenience, but that is one way you could approach it.
Right. Well, my last question before I turn it over to Jeremy is, everybody gets into this for one reason or another, and it's usually that they've had some kind of experience with it. So my question is, have you?
No.
No.
I am I've never seen a UFO.
Wow. Come over to my house. Okay. Well, I mean, that's an honest answer.
Like many young kids in the 1950s and early 60s, I picked up a book by Donald Kehoe when I was maybe 10, 11 years old. Read through it and was fascinated, not only by the topic, but also by the fact that Kehoe brought documentation, and clear documentation. And I remember taking it to a teacher of mine, one who I respected very much, and telling him I thought this book was really very interesting and he might be interested in it, and him just looking at it and saying, "This is science fiction and I'm not interested in science fiction," and just sort of walking away. That happened several times in my educational process, and each time it sort of, besides irritating me, basically made me more curious. What finally got me off the edge into actually getting into investigation was a conference that I was one of the co-sponsors for at our college on false memory syndrome, in which a group of experts got up and, for want of a better word, basically commented at length upon alien abduction as being an instance of false memory. The arguments that they made for it, I thought, were poorly supported by their data. Their data was flawed, in terms of too small samples and also selection of abductees and other witnesses by advertising in the papers for them. Which I thought was the worst possible way to possibly get an abductee sample I ever heard of.
Right.
Basically I thought it was bad science. And if the people came from Harvard, I thought the institution ought to be ashamed, because of that. So I was intrigued more because I felt like here's an area that people just really aren't doing the work and they're being misled by bad studies. And so that got me more interested too. Here's an area you could do research in and potentially maybe even find out something.
Right.
Of course, little did I know.
Of course, then you got into ufology and found out it's worse there than it is in the scientific. Jeremy, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, well, let's see. You had said that your curriculum would go back to 1945. Do you have no love in your heart for airships? What about the ancient astronaut theory? All of that fun stuff. Do you see any merit to that, or is 45 your cutoff point?
I guess
or 47. I'm sorry, I'm saying 45.
I'm willing to scout the possibility, that there may be something involved with these earlier episodes, but at the same time, they are so far in the past and so clouded by storytelling, I guess you'd say, that it's difficult for me to really work up a lot of enthusiasm for them. It's hard enough, to deal with the Roswell incident, which has reached, venerable age now. And that's something which is getting worse every year, of course, in terms of the amount of available witnesses. But those things that go far back in the past like that are just hard for me to focus on, because you end up with such vague data and such vague descriptions of what's going on, mixed in with mythology and a whole lot of other stories in really ancient times.
Well, just as an anthropologist, do you see a correlation between ufology and, say, some of the things indigenous peoples have been saying forever, or shamanism speaks to, or even the occult? Do you see similarities in these things?
Well, without having made a specific study of it, I do know that there are a number of cultures who have specified that beings came from the sky, and had interactions with people here on Earth. That's, I think, something which is suggestive, in that way. But in terms of taking it farther than that, can you really do that? The interesting and suggestive research done on the Dogon people, of Central Africa, and their knowledge about about Sirius, and its planetary system, I guess, or its star system rather, is interesting, also. But again, it's not clear whether this was cultural contact an information that filtered in from Western society, and was taken on by the Dogon, or something that's been around with them for a very long time. So it's a little it gets into the area that I prefer to stand a little bit on more solid ground, because the ground is slippery as it is, without dealing with the problems of faulty records and faulty types of translations and interpretations that may come from the distant past.
Well, what do you do with, let's see, Rick Strassman's DMT work?
This is not something I'm familiar with. Tell me about it.
Oh, really? Well, basically that the pineal gland creates DMT, which is a natural hallucinogen in our systems. And he was basically allowed to do the first hallucinogenic studies since the LSD studies of, the 60s?
Right.
And, so he thought that he would find people were tripping. But what he actually came away from that with is that this is some sort of molecule in us that tunes us into these other realities, because people were seeing a lot of the same consistent imagery, meeting consistent beings. And, of course, some of them had abduction-type experiences and saw grays and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm just wondering what you do with that. I mean, this is something that shaman in South America talk about quite a bit, with their ayahuasca brew.
Sure.
So, I mean, in other words, it's not completely distant past. It's just, I think, something that we don't pay attention to, that people are still saying. It's just they're in cultures that are sort of tucked away or probably being bowled over by bulldozers.
No, well, I absolutely agree that one of the most important things that needs to be done, is to understand better the dimensions of consciousness that may be interacting here with these phenomena, and just to what extent, alterations in our consciousness can produce similar symptoms. However, I would caution anybody going down that line that the typical UFO incident, and even the close encounter, is oftentimes something that comes under circumstances which, seems to come out of the blue, and oftentimes very normal circumstances. It doesn't necessarily come to you only when you're sleeping, or only when you're in some type of a traumatic situation, or some type of emotional uproar. It comes, to normal people at normal times.
Right.
In that way. So you would really have to specify if some aspect of our consciousness is really involved with triggering these phenomena or allowing us to experience this, how does that happen? And how does it what are the triggers? I'd also have to know more about the experiments, which I'm sorry I don't know, because to see how exact the similarities are to abductee experiences, because that would make a lot of difference.
Mm-hmm.
All that earlier studies on abduction as birth trauma and things like that, and a variety of other explanations that have involved talking about various experiences that humans may have that might have given rise to abduction fantasies. Oftentimes give abduction scenarios that are only generally, in a general sense, like the ones that actually occur to abductees, which are oftentimes much more specific and much more detailed, in that way. So I would have to actually see what was produced using, that chemical agent in that way.
Well, I think it would be, it's interesting if what we're going to end up finding out is that here you have this intelligence that can sort of come into our lives through, like you're saying, myriad ways. One would be this sort of manipulation of consciousness. The other would be perhaps through technological means, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, if we really look at all of this stuff and we go, okay, well, this is all sort of valid, then at what point do we realize we're not really studying anything? It's like, it would be like a fish studying a fisherman, at that point,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think it's an interesting idea to propose it as a class. I just don't know. I think that classes require an answer or require something firm, and I don't think that there's anything that we have firmly grasped onto. There are certainly theories that have come and gone, and certainly the ETH is probably, hopefully, on its last legs. But then, what is there? Then you're just stuck with, well, there's this thing that's sort of been with us, and we don't really know anything about it except some of its effects, and even those might be culturally contaminated or the product of something we don't understand. I mean, what do you do with all that? How do people relate to that enough to go, yeah, I want to study that?
Well, let me just say something from the point of view of an anthropologist here. Anthropology courses about comparative religion are oftentimes based upon, for example, functional aspects of religion, what it does in a particular society. It doesn't specify. They don't specify what is the source of religion or what its particular, what its origins are, but merely study the effects that they have on societies and the people in them. One doesn't necessarily have to know the origin or what the quote unquote true reality of something is in order to see its social dimensions and its effect upon a society or a group of people. Mm-hmm. You may be dealing with a very similar situation here. It may be that the most valid way presently of studying UFOs, is to think about them in terms of their effects upon people and their societies. Mm-hmm. And try to infer as something about the nature of the phenomena themselves in terms of how they affect us, in that way. Mm-hmm. It's one of the conundrums I find in teaching. I teach a class in comparative religion, actually, and it's one of the things that is kind of annoying about my own profession is we've skirted around the issue of just what the experience of religious phenomena are to people in relation to their personal lives and things of that nature, but basically have concentrated on what those phenomena do in a social sense and think that we have explained it all, but we haven't said anything about the phenomena itself. Mm-hmm. In that way. We've only explained, what its effects are on us, in that way. We like to put names on things, without really knowing what they are. And, a little. It becomes a little annoying when people think they know something about something simply because they have a name.
Right. Well, yeah, and then do you find that that's also difficult when you're talking to the media? I mean, the way we found out about you was through the Telegraph interview that you did with them about wanting to do, or I guess they picked up the story. I don't know who you originally did the interview with, but talking about you want to do this class. And do you find that it's hard to do an interview like that without being able to talk in sound bites about something like this?
Well, I think it's hard to talk in sound bites about this, and not be completely misunderstood. The original interview I gave, which was with the Buffalo Evening News, was somewhat misconstrued, since I don't think I ever commented about making a class on the subject.
Wait a minute. Wait, record scratch. So the whole theme of the show is bullshit?
Now, I actually have put together such a class.
Oh, excellent.
And intend, in time to teach it. But as in a point of fact, in that interview, which was taken just a few moments after a talk by Peter Robbins, with me, basically I did not, in fact, really talk about that. It is something, though, that is certainly, to my way of thinking, a very valid thing to do, and long overdue to bring this into the academic mainstream. Mm-hmm. So it's as good as anything to talk about in that way.
What is the relationship between anthropology and psychology?
Hostile. No, not really, not entirely hostile. Let's put it this way. Anthropologists have a deep interest in social behavior in a cross-cultural sense, looking at people's customs, traditions, and cultural knowledge of all sorts in a cross-cultural way, cross-society way. Psychologists are primarily interested in individual personality and its development and things of that nature, with the exception of the somewhat crossover field of social psychology. Mm-hmm. I like what psychologists do, and they offer some unique insights, into individual phenomena. But when they try to reduce societies and social phenomena merely to individual personality and individual types of phenomena, then they run aground. Mm-hmm. Which is why, and I think you're on the right track, when you talk about cultural contamination, it is a relevant factor here, because all these experiences are embedded in a culture of a particular time and place. Mm-hmm. So it's something that does have to be taken into consideration. It can't be simply reduced to molecules and the workings of the brain.
Right. I have some left field questions for you about MUFON.
Sure.
One is, do they have a stance? I mean, do they have any sort of, like the ETH, is that sort of their main stance? Do they have anything like that in their mission statement?
In MUFON?
Yeah.
MUFON, I believe, is primarily focused throughout its history on the ETH. They are not, I would say, totally without supporters of other hypotheses. Mm-hmm. And certainly the work we do as investigators does not depend upon the ETH, in any way. But it, there's no doubt that is still the predominant hypothesis, I think, among MUFON investigators. I just don't happen to be one that necessarily entirely buys into that.
Well, what do you think? Here we are, however many decades later, still looking at the same sort of data that is going to produce the same sorts of answers. What do you think they're in it for now, or what are you in it for now if there's not something new that you can latch onto?
Well, I'll speak for myself, not for others, on that regard. Everyone has their own reasons for being in this. And once they get into it, it becomes unreasoning anyways. It's obsessive. Comes right down to it. In my own case, I believe that, the phenomena needs not wider study, but more minute study. I think the phenomena has been both blessed and cursed by people who want to explain it all in one big all-inclusive theory and expect it's all going to fit together, neatly in a package. And that's something that a lot of cases you can't do. I think that one of the things that's going to need to be done is population studies of individual human populations to see what factors, social, anthropological, psychological, are actually at work in unusual perceptions within specific populations. I think that has to be done widely, and it's going to take a long time. Mm-hmm. I approach this with the idea that I'm not going to get this answer in my lifetime.
Right.
And that like any other science, it's going to build over and above any single scientist's lifetime, and that it's going to have to be worked from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And there will be on occasion geniuses that'll come along that will advance things considerably. But there's too many people, and has been since the 1940s, who think that they can go to heaven without dying.
Right.
Literally. They think that they can come up with the answer, and it's going to basically be just there and easily seen, and it ain't going to be that easy.
Well, that sort of gets to a question I was trying to figure out how to word delicately, which is that it seems MUFON, pretty much in order to join MUFON, it's like the equivalent of getting a decoder ring. And does that bother someone like you, who is a doctor and a professor at a college, that you're working alongside, some of them are morons? Or do you think that it's great because it's sort of an equal playing field?
I think that the nature of the field and the nature of MUFON is largely predicated upon what it's been made, by the scientific community and by the governmental authorities. If you're going to have a science which will not be scientifically investigated, that can only leave, if it's going to be investigated, although the amateur to do it. Mm-hmm. Frankly, I thank God for the amateur. There's a very interesting and I think kind of appropriate T-shirt that I saw at the last MUFON convention. It said on the back, "Doing the Air Force's work since 1969." Which might be amended to say "doing the scientist's work, since 1947."
Right. Well, speaking of the military, do you think that? Let me ask you: does MUFON go the way of we need disclosure to the extent that, for instance, the disclosure movement does? I mean, is that something that they rely on in terms of saying, well, this is why we're not getting any answers, because the government must know X and they're not sharing it with us?
Well, I think there are individual MUFON members who think that. For myself, I don't really, to be somewhat crude, give a rat's butt, about whether the government discloses or not. Mm-hmm. I want to do my little search and do my little research, add my little penny to the pile. If the government wants to help us out or offer, a solution, fine and dandy, but I'm not betting on it or counting on it. And I would say that for those who are, you're in all likelihood going to be sadly disappointed. Go about and do your own work and, carry out your own research designs and do what you can do.
Right. Well, do you think that the government, when you look at the way they treat this issue, does it smack of a cover-up still? I mean, do you think that they still care about this issue? Do you think they're just sort of letting us do what we want and they don't have to interfere anymore? Or do you think that none of that ever happened to begin with?
Oh, I don't think there's any real doubt that there has been a cover-up in the past. Everything from the Bollinger memo, at the close of Project Blue Book, in which Bollinger admitted that there had always been a separate route for important military significant cases that didn't go through the Blue Book files and the Blue Book system. Basically, that's an admission right there. There's a cover-up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder
have to go any farther than that.
I wonder what they're actually covering up, because if it's not the ETH, I mean, one would assume that they would maybe know more about what it is not. Maybe they've figured out it's not aliens or something, whatever that is.
You may be very right about that.
Yeah, I wonder what those documents look like.
Yeah, you may be very right about that. They may be covering up their own ignorance, and their own inability to figure this out, which is a very difficult thing for a governmental or military authority to admit. We just don't know what the hell this is. That's a possibility. It's kind of a depressing possibility, but it is a possibility. It's another good reason why I think it's a good idea for everybody just to get on with their own pursuits, and not worry too much about whether the government is going to give us disclosure or not, because they may not know what to disclose.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just ask you one final question here. In all your years of looking at this stuff, what have you learned?
I think I've learned that there is this completely unknown realm of experience that lies at the boundaries of our everyday reality, that smacks us in the face, every so often, and that try as a culture's worldview may to try to exclude it, it's going to show up, and it's going to keep smacking us in the face again and again. You can try to make UFOs or any other paranormal phenomena go away or pretend they don't exist, but 40,000 years of human history say these things are going to continue smacking us in the face. So we can either try to find out as best we can what they are, or we can just continue being overawed and kind of completely blown away when they smack us in the face the next time.
Wait, you said 40,000 years?
Yeah.
What was 40,000 years ago? Because you said you would only do the study to 47.
Well, I'm talking here about going back to the beginnings of the origins of religion and spiritual beliefs and things of that nature with Neanderthals and others. The idea that there is some other type of dimension of reality, out there has been the belief of human beings since who knows when. But at least that long. And this phenomena, along with other paranormal phenomena, aren't going away just because a group of scientists or even a single society with a highly materialistic view says, be gone, you're not real.
Right.
Ain't going to happen.
Well, Dr. Haseley, thank you very much for doing the show and for doing it on such short notice once again.
Yes.
I appreciate
it.
I appreciate your having me here.
And hey, I hope you're out of college, so you're ahead of the game here. I hope you're able to get some sort of class going. That would be it would be interesting.
I think it would be challenging and eye-opening for me, because the what usually comes out of presenting challenges like that to people's view of reality is either your own eyes get opened more by what they know and what they've experienced, or, basically they just get pissed off as hell and leave the class. So it's always a challenging and interesting experience when you do something like that.
Well, I'll leave it on this note. It sounds like, from what you're saying about all this phenomena, that if there is a right guy for the job, you're probably it, because you've not settled on, a definition of what this thing is, and it sounds like you're pretty clear-headed about how you would want to tackle a timeline for it. So all the best to you, and let us know if it does go through, and we'll promote the college on the show. I'm sure they love that.
We'll advertise it.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This is Mark Nesbitt. I wrote The Ghosts of Gettysburg. You are listening to Paratopia with Jeff and Jeremy.
Paratopia, Jeremy Vaeni here to remind you once again of the 2 for $20 sale going on right now. That's right, you get my book, I Know Why the Aliens Don't Land, and my movie, No One's Watching an Alien Abductees Story, for $20. The DVD is Region 1, which means unless you live in America or Canada or have a player that will decode it somewhere else in the world, if you're somewhere else in the world, you're screwed. So, maybe not for you, but for everyone else. You can watch my movie, you can read my book, you can only spend $20, and you do that by sending me an email at paratopiapodcast@gmail.com, and I will bill you through the PayPal. All right, take care. And remember, it comes with a surprise free gift. So the Jeff.
So the Jer.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great.
It's tax season.
Yeah, I just got done on mine last night, so I don't have a problem. You, on the other hand,
well, I'll just file an extension. That won't be a problem.
Oh,
Dr. Haseley.
Yeah, another exclusive interview for Paratopia.
Is there a doctor in the house? We're good at getting the doctors.
We are. Yeah, a little change of speed for this show lately.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I realized
an interview where we don't yell.
Right. Well, and I realized my prejudice toward someone associated with MUFON. Like, I just automatically assume that they're ETH and they're, dumb.
Well,
but I guess I was wrong because he was both lovable. I'll say lovable.
Yeah, he's
and
a nice
smart and articulate and all of the good things that you would want in a guest.
Absolutely.
And Jeff, and a human being, and probably in a professor.
I see where you're going there. It's very clever.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think I think he's got a good idea for the class going on. I think we met someone at an X conference some years ago now from Cleveland. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. Aaron might be Aaron, who was teaching a college course in this, non-credit, of course, I'm sure, but. I don't know. I think he's right. I think it would be good for people to be able to go take a class on this. I mean, and especially people who may never have given it a second look. For people to get fresh eyes on this from someone like him, who's going to give them not his version of events, of scenarios, of all this, but strictly what the field is producing, what they're finding out, case studies, that sort of thing. I think that would be really nice to. Start someone out that way, then rather than, let me think, go to Above Top Secret.
Right.
Nothing against Above Top Secret. I love Above Top Secret, but...
however...
Well, let's just say it's degraded yet again in the quality of conversation. So
Again? What do you mean again?
Well, it's just... It was on the upswing there for a while. There was... you could actually go in and have a coherent conversation, but I don't know. It's just and maybe it's probably no fault of the message board itself. It's probably just the nature of so many people being on that message board trying to have some discussion in their own merit and their own little sphere of knowledge about the subject, and it just turns into a obliterated goddamn mess before it's all over with. So nothing that can be done about that. That's just people. That's not the board. Right. And there's certainly some good folks on that board who will give you a good conversation and all that. I am still a little bit amazed that the whole Emma Woods thing hasn't shown up on that board as of yet.
Well, why don't you do something about that?
Nope, I'm not doing a thing about it. No. Well, we're going to see how long this takes to break. So we can go, we've been talking about that for a month.
Well, I think, do you think possibly one of the reasons it's not breaking is that it takes some work?
Yeah, that could be it. I don't know. I think at least at Above Top Secret, there's a lot of people there that do think highly of the UFO talking heads. You know, in many different, I mean, everyone from Bob Dean to Rich Dolan to all the way down to Billy Meyer and George Adamski and all that. So, I mean, I think you've got a real cross-section of the ufological humanity in there, which ultimately that becomes a problem, I think, at some point. I don't know that there's really any factions of thought in that message board. I don't think anybody really pairs off and says, I'm with him, That just doesn't happen there. It's everybody for themselves and tossing around ideas. But like I say, it's still a core of good people over there. So it's still a place worth looking every now and then.
You know what I was surprised by in this interview is that he's not the first ufologist to have said, I don't know what Rick Strassman's work is.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
That was required reading. I thought that was one of those required reading books.
No. Well, and I think, to be honest with you, it's the only thing that disappointed me a little bit about George Hansen when he was on the show. He basically chucked that out because he feels that brings the entire experience down to a physiological reaction, which really wasn't kind of the gist of what we were getting at. And I'm not sure he really understood what we were getting at there at all. But no, I think when I think by and large the DMT subject for the purist ufology people, that's a taboo because you're on drugs.
Right.
And that's a problem because that is the immediate question that is on a ufological questionnaire. If you have a sighting, that'll be one of the first questions you get asked because I've called MUFON and I've had someone come talk to me and, I was asked, what is your experience with psychedelics? What is your relationship to altered states? Do you take drugs? Do you like dope, smoke dope? I mean, that was one of the big questions. And immediately I feel like, if I say, or if I were to have back then have said yes to any of that, I think that I'd have been summarily dismissed. That's one of the big things the skeptics will put towards it. I mean, what did we hear on Larry King from Bill Nye the Science Guy? What did he say about Bentwaters Woodbridge? Or, I'm sorry, not Bentwaters Woodbridge, but the Maelstrom case. Someone was drinking. Really? Someone was drinking on a nuclear base, right? Somebody's got their finger on the button and a Coors Light in the other hand. I'm not buying that, okay? So that's just how lame the skeptical excuse can be. And I think when you start talking about DMT and you start talking about psilocybin, you're immediately talking about altered states, and there's this huge prejudice that goes against that immediately when you bring that into a UFO case or an alien abduction case. I think the purist of ufology would immediately dismiss that. So that's a problem. That's a problem because really it fits the subject better than their nuts and bolts does. So there. That's it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I think that's why a lot of people haven't heard of it in ufology circles.
This is true.
And it's time for listener mail.
Our first letter comes from Patrick O'Neill. Hi, guys. My name is Patrick O'Neill. I love your podcast, and I've been listening since day one. I have a question more for Jeff. Thanks.
Uh-oh.
I think. I've heard you talk a couple of times about Irish people being somewhat predisposed to the paranormal, and was wondering what exactly you've found out. I'm wondering because I'm 75% Irish and 25% Scandinavian, and have been having weird beep happen as far back as I can remember. I would love to learn what you have found out. Keep up the good work on the show. Thank you.
I haven't found anything out.
Good job, Jeff.
I'm sorry. There's nothing to tell. That's just been more or less a constant for me since about 92 or 93 when I started really actively contacting or being contacted by experiencers. I didn't really do form sheets or anything like that. I would just talk to them. But one of the questions I would ask is, what's your nationality? What is your IQ? If you know it, if they've taken an IQ test, did they know what their IQ was? Had you ever dabbled in any occult practices? Whether that be, God, I don't mean to insult anybody of the Wiccan persuasion, but I think we could, or I think society more or less views that as an occult practice of some sort. I view it as a religion, but that's just me. right down to a Ouija board. And some of the constants that came out, and another one was the use of psychedelics, which always kind of set people a little bit on the defensive, but I asked it anyway. And I found that a lot of the people were Irish, Celtic, German descent, that the IQ was above average, that they had at one time or another in their lives dealt or been interested in the workings of an occult practice of some sort, whether that be interest in Ouija boards past the slumber party shenanigans, all the way into, I dabbled a little bit in voodoo, or I made a voodoo doll, or I read a book about being a white witch, and I did a couple of things there. And psychedelics were not as prevalent as all of those in the affirmative, but the psychedelics had been in a significant enough percentage to mention. I'll put it to you that way. What any of that means, I don't know. I've had some people tell me that it doesn't mean anything, that it's strictly that the people that I'm dealing with in the area that I am in the country, that doesn't mean anything. We just heard Dr. Haseley say he doesn't see any real cultural similarities. I have. That's just me. And to be honest with you, I would say back when I was doing chats on AOL and we'd have a new experiencer show up in the room, that would be one of the first questions I would ask is, what's your nationality? And then I would kind of simultaneously I am everyone else in the room and say, bet you they're going to say Irish or Celtic. And boom, there it was. And they'd say, yeah, I'm Irish, or I'm Celtic, or I have Germanic blood, Hessian, that sort of thing. So I don't know what any of it means. I have no idea. I do find it interesting that, there's certainly a wee folk connotation to the Celtic Irish thing, but that's, I don't know, what do you say to that? It's a passport to Mangunia type thing. So I don't know.
Well, this is something that's been around in ufology. I mean, Strieber's certainly taken note of it. I remember at least one of his books. So
yeah. What it means, who knows? Yeah. Who knows? I mean, there's no good answer.
Laura writes, Dear Jeremy, I was listening to the dream you recounted on the Aftermath show, and when you described the mouse coming out of your head, it reminded me of a dream I had years ago. And then she goes into the dream, and then she says, I think the dream represented something true, which is probably more complex, but this was what I could understand. Maybe what we take to be reality is simply where some part of us is focused. I think other parts of our consciousness are probably focused in other quote-unquote places. We kind of agree that there is one quote-unquote objective reality, but that's just another mindset that we all agree on, so it works. And to change the subject completely, thank you and Jeff for championing Emma Woods. Jacobs was just so obnoxious to her. Regardless of his theories and the efficacy or lack thereof of hypnotherapy, who would want to entrust themselves to someone who behaves like such a jerk? In the tape of their phone conversation, he was just so condescending, snotty, and unable or unwilling to hear her. Best, Lara, the one who found the feathers in the crop circle. Well, thanks, Laura. Jeff, you had sort of, I won't even say that this was an experience, but you had an interesting dream with the same sort of voice that I had heard at your place. And although I don't think neither of us is going to go on the limb and say, this is what this whole alien thing is about, I think it was an interesting thing that this voice in the dream relayed to you, and will certainly get people thinking, so maybe it's worth mentioning.
Okay. Well, I was asleep, so, all of this has to be taken with, as far as I'm concerned, with a huge dose of salt, because when one is asleep, anything can happen. But I had a dream some months ago, which I don't think we've talked about on the show before, which is the one where I'm apparently speaking at the Gaithersburg Hilton, where the X conference is being held, and Jeremy is sitting in the back of the room, and he's making faces at me, and I'm trying not to laugh. And at some point during my presentation, when I think things are really going well, Jeremy gets up and begins running through the crowd saying something about, I don't know, I think he had scissors, and he was like, I'm running with scissors, but he's got a grass skirt on with no pants. And then he bolts through the door, and as he bolts through the door, he has to push really hard on that bar to get out the door, and his bare ass is shown to the entire crowd, and some woman in the front row goes, "Oh God!" Yeah, so
Sounds about right.
I woke up from that dream laughing but with a twinge of complete embarrassment for Jeremy. For some reason, that dream happened again the other night, but only Jeremy didn't get up and run out. It was just me giving this presentation. And some man in the front row got up and started asking me quite forcefully, well, what are these things? What are these beings? What do you think they are? You've had these experiences. Obviously, they've had to impart something to you as to what they are. And, I just kept shaking my head saying, I don't know what they are. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have an answer for you. But he kept on, and it was persistent. And at that point in the dream, someone sounded like they were literally right in my ear whispering. I can't remember it verbatim like I told you yesterday, Jeremy. All I can tell you is that this whisper started in the dream, but it shook me out of the dream as if someone were really in the room next to the couch I was laying on, whispering in my ear. And it woke me up. I was wide awake. I saw that the TV was on, and yet this whisper is still right there. And when I turned my head to look, there was nothing there. But it said that essentially the beings were and are ideas that have not yet been conceived of, that they are not beings per se. They are not people. It's not a race. They are ideas that no one has thought of yet. And they are desperate to be thought, because then thought means action, which means manifestation in this reality. That's not all that was said. It was said at one time, but that was the overall feeling that I got from it, that these beings are ideas, which I thought, that's dumb. What does that mean? And then I related that to you. So, I don't know. It was a weird thing. It was just a weird thing with the voice. That's what kind of freaked me out about it. Kept going.
But you had also said that your thinking behind this was that these are ideas that sort of need to attach themselves to people, for them to exist,
for them to be real, right? I mean, real as we know, real, yeah.
I mean, God, imagine. I mean, just think about.
How's that for an abstract concept? I mean, It doesn't get much worse than that.
Well, you've got all possibilities, right? Sitting in superposition, and then anything that we choose becomes the thing that we choose. So you've got every other possibility just sitting around, like trying to break down the door of perception and,
right.
in the form of these beings. I mean, that's
pretty weird. Yeah.
My God, that's mind-blowing.
I just, I didn't know what to make of that other than, that's... and it made sense at the time when I first woke up and I leaned over the couch and I'm like, the hell was that? And what was that in my ear? Because, I'll say this because this seems pertinent to say, is that I've been falling asleep quite a bit on the couch lately. And Lisa's been essentially leaving me to die on the couch every night. And I wake up, I don't know, around the 3 o'clock hour. And one of these days, this past weekend, I think, I was laying there watching TV, I had my glasses on. The only light that was on was next to the fart chair. One of these days, we're going to have to take a picture of my living room. But
scratch and sniff.
Yeah. And a light came out of the living room, out of the dining room into the living room, about maybe a foot down from the ceiling. It wasn't on the ceiling. It seemed to be completely freestanding, free floating. But it was a dash, and it wasn't a fast thing. It was actually quite slow, and slow enough that I got to lay eyes on it. Originally saw it out of my peripheral, and then looked over and saw it moving. And 1, 2, 3, and it fades out as it enters into the living room. I had to force myself not to get up off the couch and go in and brush my teeth and get in bed. I just that's my first instinct is, okay, I'm getting out of here. I laid there and I waited and waited and waited to see more, and I didn't see anything else. So there's been a lot of odd light phenomena in the house lately. So I don't know what to make of that. There's also a fairly good possibility that that yesterday when I took the day off, and Lisa was off of work, we were in the room I'm in now, and we heard my son upstairs playing his bass guitar. Only he was at school, and the bass guitar was in the room with us. Now,
that's right. Jeff actually called me. We were on the phone. I had just hung up with him, and not 60 seconds later, ring, ring, ring. Jeremy, you're not going to believe this. So I was like Scooby-Doo was like, well, while you're on the phone with me, why don't you creep up to the bedroom and see what's in there? Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if he was there? Lisa made the suggestion that could it have been a car outside with a bass thumping, and it could have been, but there's it's just a really distinctive sound when it's him in his bedroom playing the bass. It reverberates through the floor, and that's very much what this sounded like. So I can't really qualify it in any meaningful way, but it was just a little weird.
Well, you don't exactly live on a busy street either.
No, not at all. So there's been a couple of little strange things, and then to have this voice in a dream that then, precipitates outside the dream in a waking state where I'm a little bit panicked, was a little weird. And so that was what the voice said, that these beings are ideas, that's what it is. That, like you said on the phone to me, that doesn't really jive with the rest of this, doesn't really. What does that mean for craft? What does that, or craft, but a disc in the air or whatever? What does that mean to that? What does it mean to ufology in general? I mean, how does that fit into a larger puzzle? And I don't know that it does.
Speaking of craft in the air, speaking of discs,
here we go.
Hey, didn't you see one of them?
Lisa and I were at Walmart on. Was that Saturday? Yeah, it was Saturday. And we were looking for some trees to replace what we lost in our Snowmageddon this past winter. And we were in the garden center at Walmart just because, hey, they've got to have the cheapest ficus we can get, right? We got to have some pines and a couple other things. So it's basically a fenced-in area, chain-link fenced-in area, open air, and they have some sort of tarp or tent that exists on the top of the fenced-in area. And so we're all the way in the back, and Lisa's walking in front of me, and she said, well, let's go in and see if they've got a chainsaw, because I'm also in the market for a chainsaw. If any of you Paratopians are selling a chainsaw, I'm interested. But as we went to go away from the back area, there was a part of the tent above me that was flapped open. And I could see clearly the sky through it. And I saw what I originally thought was a lamp, a street lamp, like a parking lot lamp. It was silver, it was round, it was flat on the bottom, and like a tapered disc on top with 3 segmented lines around the top. And I looked up, I saw it, and then I looked down at Lisa, and I started to walk, and I took a step, but then I didn't lift up my back foot, and I rocked back on my foot, and I looked back up again, and it was gone. And I'm like, I looked at Lisa, and I was white as a sheet, and she goes, "What's the matter?" I said, "I just saw a flying saucer." Stupid. And I rocked back on my foot, and I looked, and I craned my neck around, and I go over to the fence, and I'm trying to peek over this edge of this tarp, or what is this, tent, or whatever it is. And there's nothing there. And the lamps that they have in the parking lot are the square black grouping of 3 on a black post. They're not even remotely silver and round. I went, as we left, we drove around back just to see. My thought was, did I get a glimpse of some sort of air duct on top? I mean, we've all seen those domed air ducts with I don't know, kind of like a double-decker disc type shape on it to circulate the air. Thought maybe that might have been it. And there's nothing back there on that building whatsoever to have made that shape, that color, not with that detail. And then the thing that was weird that made me back up was that it was fairly large, in that I thought, street lamp, take a step, wait a minute, that seemed a little too far away to have been a street lamp, a little too high in the air, and rock back, and it's gone. I only saw it for literally seconds. I mean, that's all the longer it was, but there was something there. So, yeah, there's that. I don't know what to make of that, but I fully looked all around the place for something that it could have been, and there was just nothing there to explain that for me.
Nice. Well, I think I told you, I know I emailed Whitley Strieber, because I think it's time to get him back on the show. Whitley, if you're out there and you're listening, we would really love to talk to you again.
Yeah, please.
But, so I don't remember if I mentioned this to you or just in the email to him, that I am back on my high school pattern of waking up at 3:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. Like, whether something's going on or not.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, usually something is.
Right.
Whether it's a mouse running out of my neck or...
Other assorted craziness?
Yeah, except for a couple of nights ago, I told you I woke up at 2:30, and this was, you told me, like maybe it was related, I don't know, but that there was the earthquake in China. So it was the earthquake in China night. Although I think the earthquake in China took place like at, 7 p.m. their time or something, so probably unrelated. Why would it be related? Well, because when that tsunami hit the Pacific Rim many years ago, that absolutely was the trigger for this stiff neck where I could not move my head, that I never went to the doctor for, and then a year later still had the problem. I'm stubborn that way. And that was the first time I ever did acupuncture, and it worked. Got rid of that. But I mean, that was that night, which was, I think, Christmas Eve, whatever year that was, and I absolutely related it to that because I had read a bunch of stuff later about how people were having neck and back injuries seemingly related to that, seemingly just around, right after that thing hit. Well,
I mean, how weird is it that you've had some fairly odd stuff lately? I've had some fairly odd stuff as of late, and now we have this eruption in Iceland.
Yeah, we're gonna have to rethink this 2012 thing. I think.
I'm not going there, but I do find it weird that.
Well, hold on a sec, Jeff. Before you get into that, let me just say that the reason I brought up the 2:30 in the morning thing is that I got up. I woke up feeling as though there's someone in the house or something, but there's no one there, and I'm feeling this energy, not like the energy that's in me energy, but like an energy going through me, like as if a beam of some sort, but not necessarily like from top down, just something in the air between me and the mattress, moving, oscillating.
Electrical feeling?
Not an electrical feeling, just...
Staticky?
No, like if I were to put something on me, it might float off, like sheets or something might float off my body or something. Like just a weird oscillating...
Buffer type feeling.
A buffer, yeah, but moving through me,
Okay.
Like a wind or something. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
Okay. Wind is good. That's a good enough.
Or a pressure, oscillating pressure. How about that?
Pressure, okay.
And there was just some sort of I don't even know, just shapes and stuff like that. Once again, I find myself, when I close my eyes, back in that sort of hallucinogenic onset stage of seeing fractals and pretty colors and all that stuff give way to geometric shapes. And I kind of wanted to see where it was going to go, but I really had to pee, so I got up and went to the bathroom and went back to bed. And it was still there. I mean, whatever this energy was didn't go away. And and eventually it did. I just sort of waited it out, you know? I didn't, like, fall back asleep until it was gone, but it just sort of petered out, and that was it. So I don't know what to do with that other than be really tired in the morning.
Yeah, well, there's that.
But what were you going to say?
Well, what I was going to say was, like I said before, is it's odd that these things, at least for my money, I have not been paying more attention to this phenomenon, but yet there does seem to be some weird shit going on for me at night. I can't say as I put a whole ton of stock in the dream part of that. I never have put much stock in that, but certainly the light in the room I saw with open eyes, and certainly whatever was in the sky when we were in the store that day was there, and I clearly saw it. There is another thing that's going on that Jeremy and I are still kind of investigating, so we'll mention that at a future date. But there's three things in fairly close proximity, and then we have this eruption in Iceland. We have the earthquake in China. I mean, it seems like, you know, it seems to be like either a precursor or a post effect to these environmental things. So I'm going to ask the listeners, because I know we have a lot of experiencers who are listeners of the show, to write us at paratopiapodcast@gmail.com and tell us, you can look at MSNBC and you can see when the dates of these things happened. The Icelandic eruption, I'm not sure when that was, but I think it was yesterday, right? Yeah, as the taping of this show. That would have been Wednesday the 14th, right? My birthday. Idiot.
Happy birthday.
And so I'm curious if any of our listeners out there who have these experiences, did you have anything happen just before or after these things that, like, I'm thinking maybe is there a connection to Earth events like this that, I don't know, I'm just curious how many of you out there actually had something that you can't deny that seemed rather off the beaten path, that genuinely struck you odd. Let's keep dreams out of this scenario right now. Let's stick to genuinely observed weird stuff. I'd be curious. So give us an email, paratopiapodcast@gmail.com.
Well, Jeff, I think that brings us to the end of our show.
I think it does. A fine broadcast this week. I'm very pleased with it.
Oh, good. Very good. Me too. I'm very tired.
Well, you've been getting up late.
Yeah, I can't do this. I mean, it's this weird thing of, like, God, you're right back in that high school pattern, and what happens in high school? Beings walk into your room and you get frightened.
Right.
Oh, is that what's going to happen again? Like,
right.
Is this where this is going? I don't know.
Huh.
But it hasn't happened yet.
Well, don't twiddle your thumb at it. Don't thumb your nose.
I'm trying not to be scared. At the 2:30 in the morning thing, I wasn't scared. I just sat there interested to see what would happen next, and nothing did. Maybe it needed me to be scared for something next. I don't know.
I was scared of that light, but I sat there and I just waited, and I thought, no, don't get up. It didn't. Nothing's. I keep reiterating to myself when I see this stuff. Did it hurt you, moron? Did it hurt you? Did it do anything to you? No. Then just lay here and watch. This should be interesting to you. This is what you're trying to study. Let's look at it. Let's kind of take charge of your fight or flight mechanism here and just sit. I will not be moved. Take that attitude. So that's what I did.
Repeat after me, Jeff. I can be
strength. Yeah. I mean, I didn't move, so I didn't see anything else. But still, I'm telling you, that light was very strange. And I'll tell you what, I would categorize that if I had to. If a scientist asked me, "What do you think you observed?" I would have to say that looked like plasma. It did look like a plasmatic type of light. So I don't know. Maybe there's something to that.
Well, maybe that's a segue to a future episode, because it turns out NARCAP is going to be releasing, if they haven't already, I don't think they have yet, but releasing their latest paper on their plasma studies.
Excellent.
And hopefully we'll be able to get Ted and Dr. Haynes, or one of them, hopefully both of them, on the show to talk about it
Sounds
in
great.
the very near future.
Excellent. Well, let's wrap it up.
Let's do it.
Say goodnight, Jeremy.
Good night, Jeremy.
Good night.
Yes.